Yo, welcome to Cherokee Now. Today we have Chief Richard Sneed joining the show. Welcome to the show, Chief.
Morning, Chris. Good to see you again.
You too. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the housing merger and its importance, as well as clear the air on from some public concerns about this merger and kind of give some insight as to why it's happening. So give us a brief overview of the issue at hand. What is this merger?
So, the biggest issue is the fact that the Qualla housing program, and just to give some history on the program, it's a HUD-funded program, Housing and Urban Development. It was more for low-income families. In that program, we have low-income rentals. We have low-income housing as far as like a mortgage-type package where someone can be a homeowner. The good news is that because of the financial success of the tribe, we've raised our people above the poverty line, where a majority of our community doesn't qualify for the home ownership program. We do have a lot of people that qualify for the rental program, and we have, I think, about 140 rentals, and we also have a plan to add, I believe, 32 more units, low-income rental units. Okay. So that part of the program is still needed and necessary, and our QHA employees maintain those rental properties, and we're going to add more to the inventory. Where we don't see the need that we used to have was the need for a low-income mortgage. Gotcha. We used to have the mutual help program and programs of that nature. Now we called the Salagi House program. The goal for this year was only 3 homes.
3 homes?
3 homes, yes. But again, that's a good problem to have. It means that because of per capita distribution, because of the jobs, the good-paying jobs that are available here, either as a tribal employee, a school employee, a Boys Club employee, a Harrah's employee, that we really raised our people above the income threshold to where they don't qualify for that anymore.
Okay. And so just at a basic level, tell me about the 2 programs. What are the differences in what they do right now?
So the main differences are, again, QHA being a HUD-funded program. And then on the HCD side, we have multiple programs in there. The main driver for housing in HCD, though, is the portfolio loan program, where we actually use tribal dollars to create mortgages for enrolled members. But that's the lender of last resort. What we're really trying to do is to help people get qualified by an outside lender, if that's First Citizens or First Tribal Lending. We have lending institutions that will lend.
That'll lend on Qualla boundary land, because we know that's a little bit different than deeded property off the boundary.
Correct. And so in that sense, the tribe becomes the guarantor of the loan. But so we get folks qualified, and we get mortgage packages put together for them so that they can build a home on tribal land. Gotcha. Because as you mentioned, it's different than building on deeded property.
Okay.
So that's the main difference. And there are other programs within HCD, that's Housing and Community Development. Currently the HELP program resides there to assist the handicapped and elderly. We reinstituted, when I came into office, we instituted the rehab grant program, so individuals who are homeowners can actually get a financial grant to help with home improvement. If you want to put new flooring in, new windows, winterizing, whatever, we have monies available for that.
Okay. So is this an original idea, or have we tried this before?
The merger?
Yes.
The merger's been recommended for over a decade.
Okay.
So because Qualla Housing receives federal dollars from HUD, we have to have a federal grant. We have to have a federal audit done every year because it is a federal grant. And for over a decade, one of the main recommendations is you're duplicating services. Mm-hmm. You need to merge these programs because it costs more money to run this separate entity.
Right.
Whereas if we pulled it into as a tribal program and merged it as a tribal program, we would stop duplicating services on human resources, on the finance side. Now, in the past, we've done, because they had a very difficult time trying to operate their own human resource department in such a small program, so they did an MOA with the tribe, and they were utilizing our human resource department. The challenge there is now you have 2 policies, right? So there's a policy that's a QHA policy, but they're working through our human resources department. So it gets confusing. And then on the finance side, they have their own finance staff with their own software that doesn't communicate with our software. So they're basically trying to run this small organization over here, and it costs a lot more money when you do that. We already have all those services available. So the recommendation for over a decade has been merge the programs. Where that has caused an issue now for the tribe, because there's been 10 years of audits with multiple findings, and most of those findings are repeat findings year over year.
Gotcha.
Most of them speak to, I want to start by saying this. There has never been an audit finding of misappropriation of funds.
Okay.
That is a misconception. And I know there's the FBI came in and they seized a bunch of our records. We had audits. I've read audit reports, from going 10 years back, and year over year, it was poor file security, poor record keeping, but no findings of misappropriation of funds. In those audit reports, it does say, though, that if you don't correct your poor file security, if you don't correct your record keeping and your reporting,
it can lead to that, and we're not ever going to be able to know
exactly
and get those things resolved. So can you explain to us why it's important for the EBCI? We've talked briefly about the audit reports. What about the EBCI overseeing the funding? Is that a component that would help?
Well, certainly, because as I mentioned, they've had to have their own finance people. It's been very difficult to fill the finance positions.
Right.
It's difficult to fill the finance positions that we have in our larger finance department. It's a very specialized skill set. We are pretty remote out here in Western North Carolina. I think we've hired all the finance people
in North Carolina.
In North Carolina, either at the tribe, at the tribe, at the school, at the boys' club, or at the casino.
Right.
All of those folks who have that skill set, they're working someplace already. So with that in mind, we have multiple openings in our finance department that have been advertised.
That could be filled
repeatedly,
with the skill set that these folks already have, and just give them even stronger resource bases.
Well, what we would be able to do is we would be able then to pull the financial record keeping that needs to occur at Qualla Housing. We could pull that right into our system. All right, and we already have teams of people that do that.
Right.
So rather than try to run this separate external system, which is more costly, we just pull it into our existing larger system. Now, where that also is going to benefit, when we go back to the audits, because it's really being driven by that. So these negative audits year over year are really going to now have a negative impact on the tribe as a whole.
Right.
So we receive a lot of federal grants every year, the tribe does. With that, there's an audit that has to be done every year because it's federal dollars.
Right.
It's an external audit. It's not done by our internal audit. It's done by an external auditor. We have to pay for that. They bill by the hour. And because they've had multiple repeat findings on their audits, and then this year they got what was called a qualified opinion, which is a bad thing. That's not good.
It sounds good. Qualified opinion is what I want.
Yeah.
It's not what you want.
It's not what you want on your audit report. And so how that is going to have a negative impact on the tribe as a whole now is because Qualla Housing is a tribal entity and not a tribal program, that's going to now affect the tribe's overall audit report. So now when the tribe goes to borrow money, say if we're going to borrow money for a larger project, it's basically like having a bad credit report.
Right.
So now we can still borrow money. It's true. We can borrow all the money we want. It's going to be at a higher interest rate. So it means it's going to cost us more money over the long term because of this negative finding.
Is it kind of the equivalent of co-signing with your child, and your child blew that credit up?
Exactly.
It affected you now.
That's exactly right.
Because they didn't take care of that.
Right.
Gotcha.
So it's going to cost us more to borrow. It's going to affect our impact to be able to draw down those federal funds from grants. Now, what that means is on some grants that are federal grants, the tribe will actually have to put the money up first, and then we'll give our report, and then they'll reimburse us. As opposed to normally we just do a drawdown on the grant and we use the federal dollars. We don't have to touch our money. So it ties up our money. I mean, we get reimbursed, but our tribal dollars are tied up.
Our tribal dollars are being invested, which is making us money. And so every time we have to pull that back down,
it's a loss. And then lastly, and I think another place that it will impact us is because that finding is on there, when we are audited every year on all these federal grants that we get, they're going to look at us more closely. They're going to more heavily scrutinize.
And we're scrutinized now.
So, for example, maybe previously on an audit, they would have taken 5 samples and looked at them.
Right.
Now they're going to take 25 samples to see. That's going to cost us more money as well, because keep in mind, these auditors get paid by the hour,
right?
And it's sometimes in the hundreds of dollars per hour. So it's going to cost us more money to have these audits done. So it's just now it's an overall negative impact on the whole tribe.
And so what we're aiming to do with this is we got to put this together, put it under our system so that we can better monitor that to reduce this and take a lower brunt on this as far as future audits go, and to get us back in good standing with these folks.
Well, if we pull Qualla Housing in as a program, that finding goes away.
Gotcha.
Because then it's looked at in the overall financial picture of the tribe.
I gotcha.
And when you're talking about a program that has a budget of like $6.2 million versus our overall budget of about $350 million,
It becomes a much smaller issue for them.
Exactly. It's a blip on the
radar.
radar
Not that it's
screen.
not an issue, but it's a smaller issue.
Correct. It's an issue, but in the overall big picture, it's a much smaller issue.
Gotcha. What about the employees that work for Qualla Housing? What are they going through right now, and what are some of the concerns or misconceptions you've heard out there, and what are we looking at with this merger with the employees?
Well, I think the biggest misconception that I've had to deal with is that he's trying to get rid of us, and we're going to lose our jobs, and people are being demoted. None of which is true. I mean,
Right.
we've and one of the points I keep trying to bring to council is I can't do anything individually. Okay,
Right.
I don't have the authority to just come and say we're doing away with Qualla Housing. We're doing away with these positions. If we do the merger, I have to present a proposed organizational chart to tribal council
Gotcha.
along with a budget, just like in the budget process.
Right.
And they either approve it or they disapprove it. So they have the final say-so in what the structure of the organization, the combined organization, would look like. So that's the biggest misconception. The reality is, and I've met with the employees twice, once at the warehouse and once we had a meeting, a breakfast meeting at the Chestnut Tree, just to put their concerns to rest. I mean, I understand. I mean,
Absolutely.
if I'm the...
It's easy for us sitting in a
Sure.
position where we've gotten to this level of we're helping build programs and we're putting things together. It's hard to remember though being that guy,
Right.
being there and hearing people talking about moving your positions around and moving your
Exactly.
departments around. What happens to me? I have my livelihood
That's
to worry
right.
about. You know, you don't understand that. I got my family to take care of.
Exactly.
It's been hard enough just to get right here. So I can sense and understand that totally.
I fully
Have empathy
understand
with
it. And that's always at the forefront of my mind is that these are tribal members.
Yep.
They have families. They have, house payments to make, car payments
Right.
to make, bills to pay. I understand that. We're trying to preserve the program.
Right. So with this, we hope to resolve some duplication of processes and services.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things currently that we're doing duplicates of?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the goal for Qualla Housing when they set their goals and objectives for the year was only 3 homes,
Okay.
to build 3 homes. So we have salaries that are at $3.2 million, and we're going to build 3 houses.
3 homes.
So what we're doing right now, we did do a restructure where Qualla Housing, the director, which that position is vacant currently, reports to the Secretary of Housing. And so we're now utilizing Qualla Housing employees basically as a contractor. So we have them doing jobs on the HCD side, and then we allow Qualla Housing to invoice HCD, and then the HCD program is paying the Qualla Housing program to do those jobs.
I gotcha.
So we're making up the budget short. There's a $1.3 million budget shortfall on the Qualla Housing side. Now, where those funds were coming from in the past is the program was utilizing payments and interest
Right.
that came in on mortgages to help fund the program, which I disagree with because those funds are supposed to go back into a revolving loan
Right.
fund account so that we can create mortgages in perpetuity.
Gotcha. It was being used as operational.
That's correct.
monies. Oh,
That's
okay.
correct. There's a provision in the ordinance that says
They
you
can
can
allow
use
that.
you can use a portion of the P&I for operational expenses. It says for administrative expenses. I would argue that's not operational expenses. It was never meant to. I don't believe that the intent of that ordinance was to use that as operational expenses to
Right.
operate the program.
Right.
It's just saying if you need to use those funds for some administrative purpose, you can. With the $1.3 million budget shortfall, they were just using the P&I
Gotcha.
as
They had to.
operational expense.
They have to.
Because they didn't have it.
So this will give us the opportunity to restructure that
Correct.
model, that business model of
Correct.
housing, and fill that shortfall, and also put the money back into some revolving
Correct.
areas.
So essentially what we're doing now is rather than using that P&I, because we want that to go back into the revolving loan fund account, so we have funds available to
Mhm.
create mortgages in perpetuity for future generations. We're now using QHA as a contractor, and if we have jobs to do on the HCD side, we just pay them like they
Yeah.
were any other contractor, and that money goes back into their
Creates
budget.
that revenue, that line.
Exactly.
Great, great. So what does this mean for current Qualla Housing clients? Are things going to look different? Are things going to work differently?
I don't think that the clients are going to notice much of a change at all. I mean, our rental program will exist in the same way.
Okay.
The maintenance and upkeep on those rentals will exist in the same way. So I don't think that the clients will notice anything different at all. They're already, if you're a current client, you're already making payments, and here's some changes we made immediately. We immediately stopped taking cash payments.
Okay.
Qualla Housing for the longest time would accept cash payments for rent or for house payments. We stopped that. We're going to electronic payments. We're trying to get up to the 21st century in our record keeping, our accounts payable, accounts receivable, etc.
Yeah.
Trying to get it to where it needs to be.
And cash is just a finicky area.
It is.
You don't want to be in. We're trying to get cash out of folks' hands all over
Sure.
the tribal government side.
It makes it more difficult for reporting as well.
Right.
It's a lot harder to track. Whereas if you're taking electronic payments, you have an
There's a
automatic
whole
record.
audited
Yeah.
record right there. Can you explain the lack of eligible clients?
Again, it goes back to the fact that we've raised our standard of living here in Cherokee. I mean, I'm 51. I'm old enough to remember when the last leaves fell off the tree in the fall. This place shut down.
Right.
I mean, it shut down, and I remember in high school writing an essay about how things hadn't changed much in 200 years, right? That our people, back then would work hard and plant and
Right.
work hard all spring, summer, and harvest in the fall so that we could make it through the winter. And we would do the same thing, when I was growing up as a teenager. Families worked hard when the work was here. And
Right.
then in wintertime, we struggled to get by until
Kind of
towards-
hibernated.
Exactly. And when-
Much like nature,
Mhm.
so we live a lot like nature. Okay.
Yeah.
So I understand a working group's been established. Can you tell us the inspiration behind the establishment of that group,
Sure.
what they'll be doing?
Sure, it goes back to the point you brought up earlier about the concern of the employees, and I
Right.
understand their concerns. They're fearful that they may lose their job, and so in order to put people's fear at rest, I feel like communication is the best tool to do that. So every time we would try to move forward a little bit with the merger, let's have another work session. Let's talk about it some more.
Because you get done the employees get done easy.
Sure.
You have to do the diligence of giving them
Right.
their time because it is a
Absolutely.
finicky area there when you're dealing with
Absolutely.
change of any kind.
Absolutely.
Whether it be your office space or the duties that you do day to day, it's scary for
Sure.
people.
So with that in mind, I made a suggestion the last time we were in a work session at council. I said, "But look, what I'm hearing is there's miscommunication, there's lack of communication, there's rumors and innuendo flying around, and the only way I know to deal with that is let's bring all the key stakeholders to the table.
Right.
Let's get the housing board there. Let's get chief and vice chief there. Let's get HCD representatives there, and most importantly, let's get some employee representatives at the table
Right.
too. They can be involved in the process, so that they know everything that we're saying in these meetings. They can go back and report to their fellow employees. Okay, here's the plan, because that's what everybody wants to know. They want to know up front what's the plan.
What's the plan?
So we want to be able to present that to them, and I want everybody to be at the table so everybody knows what's happening. So it's not just me and the housing board creating this plan and then coming back and presenting it and saying, here's the plan.
Swallow this.
Right. As opposed to if everybody's at the table, everybody has their input, and it's
Right.
open communication. It's an open forum.
Very
Very
good.
transparent.
Absolutely, and I think that's a very professional, and very good way for this community to move forward with things.
Agreed.
Being the director of communications, and you probably agree with me. Probably 99% of the issues we face day to day are just communication issues. It's just
Agreed.
let's just have a meeting, let's chat about it. Let me get your feelings about things, your perspective, hear mine. Usually, you can resolve a lot of this
Sure.
in a meeting or two and move on with things and understand we're not here to undermine each other. We're just here to help move this train along, and it's a big one. It's a
Yeah.
big one. So, what are the next steps to completing this process?
Well, Perry Shell's the chairman of the housing board. He and I have to sit down and map out a schedule for the working group. I've already spoken to a couple of employees.
Okay.
One has agreed to be the employee representative, and I need to get a second from QHA to second employee to be employee rep, and we'll bring that team together. We have an idea of what the plan is and what it's going to look like. We
Good.
just need to map it out, and that will give everybody an opportunity for input.
Good. Okay. Well, good. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the discussion before we go off the air today?
Just that I know it's difficult because, as you mentioned, change is it always causes anxiety, and certainly there have been things that have happened historically in the tribe
Right.
where people have lost jobs, even though
Yeah.
somebody said, "No, I'm not firing anybody," and then people lose jobs. So I get the anxiety. I want the employees to know that this is why I've moved toward this. Let's have this open, transparent
Right.
forum so everybody knows what's going to happen beforehand. We'll have it all mapped out, and then we'll proceed once
Good.
everybody's on board.
Good. Well, I hope we can continue to put people's fears at ease. And then, if anybody has any questions, I'm sure you could reach out to your office
Absolutely.
and ask those questions. You want to be as transparent as possible with this process. So let's get that information out there. Well, thank you for coming on with me today. I think we had a good discussion, and hopefully the public at home have learned a lot. There's a lot of thought gets put into this plan. It's not just something you do overnight. This is something you've really been working on and thinking about with this organization. So I'm excited to see this move forward, and hopefully we can really resolve some of these issues and fix some of our problems.
I appreciate it. And again, the end goal on this is preservation of the employees' jobs.
Absolutely.
That's really what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Nobody's trying to go home. We're trying to keep everybody working. In fact, pick up the business a little bit.
Exactly.
Well, that'll be it for today. If you're listening at home and if you'd like to comment on the show or ask questions regarding what we've discussed today, please comment on our EBCI Cherokee Now Facebook page at facebook.com/Cherokee Now. We'll see you again very soon. David Ibrahim.